This story is about a real estate agent named Higo. Today he had an important meeting with a wealthy landlord. The landlord rushed to greet him as soon as he entered the house and thoughtfully poured tea to invite him. Higo approached him shyly and inquired briefly about the mansion. Two people talked about the contract and the commission agreement as well as the selling price. Despite the fact that the decision had been made, the owner seemed to be depressed. Higo didn't pay much attention to that. The only thing he was concerned with was the profit that he would earn. He presented the owner with a completed contract and waited for a response. Meanwhile, the mood in the living room had deteriorated. Higo felt a shivering sensation all of a sudden. The door to the living room burst open when he turned back slightly to have a look. He inquired innocently of the landlord about the state of the facilities, infrastructure, and quality of this villa in order to conduct an evaluation, but the owner was unconcerned, simply stating that he was willing to sell at whatever price Higo deemed reasonable. Higo was taken aback by this. Suddenly, he heard a strange sound outside of the corridor. Before Higo could ask what was going on, the landlord handed him the contract and explained what needed to be revised before asking when he could resume signing. Higo received the contract, carefully memorized the customer's request, and then quickly left. The owner also sent him to the door. On the way to the door, he noticed cold air coming from this house as if something strange was going on. Apparently, he had a feeling that this landlord was concealing something from him. He moved his gaze to a small corner of the living room. Some old toys for children had been left in the corner. Higo found it difficult to comprehend, but then he set aside the story about this house and strolled out leisurely. A cold breeze blew lightly on his back as he approached the gate. Higo had the impression that someone was staring at him. He then turned his head to look again at that house. When he turned around, there was a tiny shadow standing at the upper window. The face appeared of a little boy with dark eyes and pale skin. Higo looked at him with surprise, sensing that something was wrong. The landlord told him that he didn't have a wife or child. How come there was a boy standing there? But he soon discovered that his concern was futile. So Higo walked straight to the gate to continue his work, where the boy silently watched him. It was strange that he had just left the villa not long ago. The landlord called him back with a very urgent attitude, demanding that he wanted to conclude the contract as soon as possible. Higo returned to the villa for his client. He stood in front of the house and gently rang the bell, but it took a long time for the old landlord to respond. He had been waiting outside for a long time. He banged on the door and shouted loudly because his instincts told him that something bad had happened, but it didn't work. He discovered that the door was not locked while knocking. He pushed in curiously, wondering where this old man could go. Why the landlord didn't lock the door if he went out. Back into the room, he heard painful groans of the landlord calling his name. The landlord appeared covered in blood in front of him. Something slashed across his back, and he was running to Higo in fear, looking for help. He landed on Higo's body. Higo picked up the old man reflexively, asking him what had just happened. The old man hummed. Extreme panic said that someone wanted to kill him. Higo had a chance to look behind the landlord when he fell on him, but it was a lot stranger than he thought. Behind him was an empty room with no one, no footprints, and no indication that anyone other than the owner was present. He panicked and rushed the old man to the hospital. Fortunately, the injury was minor, and he regained consciousness within a few minutes. His entire body was wrapped in white bandages, and tired eyes stared at him. When Higo asked him about the incident, his eyes revealed a little sadness and remorse. The old landlord called Higo to stand closer to him and then sorrowfully told him the whole story, beginning with a bad decision he made a year ago. He was a failed businessman at that time. The company was on the verge of bankruptcy. All of the projects he invested in had failed completely that he ended up empty-handed. During a drink with a friend, he was tipped away to save the business, a very useful trick he picked up while traveling in Thailand. That was to invite Kumantong to worship in his home. The infant demon was a dread fetal body that was placed in a statue, then cast a spell to calm the soul so that it could stay in this world to save and bless the adoptee who was considered to be his biological parents. Because he was poor and stuck at the time, he listened to his friend and traveled to Thailand to request a statue of an infant demon to worship at home. At the beginning, everything came true. The devil provided him with whatever he desired. Money kept pouring into his pocket. His previous partners had rejected him before, now also back to collaboration. Sometime later he met a beautiful young woman. The two quickly married. Not long after that, the wife became pregnant. The doctor on the ultrasound said it was a healthy boy. During the pregnancy, the wife always had a feeling of something very insecure, especially when she passed the altar of the devil that he placed in the house. One time the wife was passing by the altar of the Kumantong. She slightly looked up at the altar. In a sudden, she saw the demon's face changed, staring at her. She told her husband about this, but he not only didn't care, he also considered it as a joke. Because she couldn't sleep, the wife went down to the stairs alone as if someone made her do it. Just a few steps, a great force behind her slammed into her back. Panicked, she turned her head to see what was standing behind her. She saw the infant demon standing on the stairs, looking at her, killing sight in his eyes. She fell down the stairs, slamming her body into the ground. She was unconscious and bleeding profusely. After that, she not only couldn't keep the pregnancy, but she also lost her ability to become pregnant again. The couple started to fight from there. He couldn't hold on to that broken marriage any longer, so he watched her leave the house with a suitcase. Since then, his career had also taken a downward turn. Losing his wife and family was devastating enough that he was unable to maintain his career. To cope with his grief, he turned to alcohol, until one day, when he returned home drunk, he looked at the Kumantong statue on the altar and became enraged. He blamed Kumantong for his life being ruined and stuck, so he raised his hand intending to smash the bottle of wine on the demon's head in order to destroy the statue, but a ray of turquoise light shot at him before he could do anything. He slammed the bottle of wine onto his head instead. Blood splattered and his head hurt like hell. He regained his composure, looking around giddily, not understanding anything. When he looked up at the altar, he noticed that the Kumantong had transformed and now was staring at him with a soft, ghostly smile. Until today, he decided to stay at home and called Higo in order to discuss about the selling of this house. While he was speaking, a sharp knife from the table rushed towards him. He was fortunate to avoid the knife's tip, but the knife cut him deeply on one of his cheeks. He unconsciously looked up at the roof and noticed the Kumantong floating in the air. That demon was staring at him. His eyes were white and wide open, and he had a hostile expression on his face. The demon then cast a spell that caused his furniture to fly up and then threw him like a storm, rendering him unable to dodge. Higo felt panicked after hearing the story and worried about the contract with his landlord. He said his goodbyes to the landlord and then left quietly. He kept thinking about the horror story he had just heard as he drove. He walked past a mansion that was once thought to be a big catch for him. He couldn't help but be concerned when he saw the billboard in front of the house. Higo paused for a moment before taking a step closer. The infant demon was still looking at him from above. right at the window, but his smile had become more ghostly than ever. It happened when Boss Lu Feng was not yet a director at Police Headquarters 703. He lived in a small village. Before that, he used to work in the army, but now he only ran a small business. One day, the people in the village suddenly shouted throughout the village because someone had just died at the edge of the forest again. Everyone was shocked when they heard the news. Because this was not the first time someone had died, there had been several people recently. The villagers rushed to the edge of the forest to see who the victim was. All of them had worried expressions on their faces. The deaths appeared more and more, leading them to believe that a serial killer was appearing in this town. After seeing the dead body, everyone was even more confused. Because this time and another person was brutally killed in the same way as before. His eyes, nose, and mouth, even his ears, were filled with straw by someone. At this time, Lu Feng also arrived. He was currently assisting the village chief in managing this place. Lu Feng said, "Everyone stay calm. Stay out of the way for the village chief." The village head at this time could only shake his head, his heart full of bewilderment because another person was killed horribly like before. Because he had worked in the military, Lu Feng also understood the process. He asked everyone to disperse and not affect the crime scene. The villagers continued to talk about the murder. Everyone was anxious. Because this was in the remote countryside, the police often arrived very late. Finally, the corpse was transferred to the best healer in the village to do an autopsy. Lu Feng and the village chief anxiously awaited the result outside. After a while, the healer also finished doing an autopsy and called them in to have a look. The healer couldn't believe his eyes and didn't know what to say, so the healer called the two of them inside to witness the incident with their own eyes. After the healer dissected the body to examine the inside, all of them were shocked and scared. The inside of the victim's body was now stuffed with straw. The village chief felt that this killing method was too cruel. Why did they stuff the victim with straw like that? But the healer said, "The scary thing here was that the straw grew from the inside of the dead person's body. It was not stuffed in by someone." This thing made them both suspicious. How could such a strange thing happen? The village chief thought that perhaps the healer had made a wrong prediction. The healer was angry, saying that he had worked at a large hospital for many years. How could there be a wrong examination? After hearing that, the village chief immediately asked Lu Feng to investigate this case because he didn't know when the police would arrive in this village. Up until now, Lu Feng had never investigated murder cases, so he hesitated a bit but still had to listen to the village chief's words. That night, Lu Feng set up a patrol team to go around the village. Each person would hold a torch and a wooden spear as weapons. Then they split up to look for evidence. The team kept looking for information like that for 2 days, but nothing happened. On the third day, while they were patrolling the entrance of the village, suddenly Lu Feng felt a severe stomach ache and needed to find a place to go to the toilet urgently. So Lu Feng placed the torch and spear near the rock. Then he went into the bushes to solve the stomach. Perhaps because he ate a lot of seafood in the afternoon, he had a stomach ache. It was comfortable to go to the toilet on time. While he was going to defecate, Lu Feng saw a black shadow appear from afar. It seemingly was dragging something. In the dark, Lu Feng saw a man in a robe. He was stuffing something into another man's mouth. And then the man waited silently. In the dim darkness, Lu Feng could not see the man's face, but a terrible thing happened. Straw began to grow from the mouth and eyes of the man laying on the ground. In just a few moments, they sprouted and fruited like rice seeds. After that, the man in the row picked up those grains of rice and ate them with delight. Then he left the man's body there and left. Everything happened very quickly. Lu Feng did not have time to react. He could only pull up his pants, take the torch, spear, and chase after him. As soon as he caught up with the man, Lu Feng shouted and asked him to stop. The man was a bit surprised, but immediately threw a white powder at Lu Feng. But suddenly a thick fog appeared in front of him. The fog was so thick that Lu Feng couldn't see everything. There was a shadow coming closer to him. As soon as the shadow approached, Lu Feng almost froze. He was not a human, but a straw scarecrow with glowing eyes and terrifying sharp teeth. After regaining his composure, Lu Feng took a wooden spear and hit the straw scarecrow directly. Taking advantage of the dense fog, he passed Lu Feng easily. At this time, the fog was so thick that Lu Feng could not see clearly, but he was always on guard not to be attacked by surprise. From behind, Lu Feng felt a killing intent. A dark shadow was slowly approaching him. Immediately, Lu Feng turned back to defend himself. A straw tentacle suddenly rushed out of nowhere. The tentacle began to wrap around his neck and squeeze. Now it no longer looked like an ordinary straw scarecrow, but on its body grew many straw tentacles like an octopus. Lu Feng was squeezed by the monster to the point of suffocation and couldn't take it anymore. Then suddenly, Lu Feng remembered the knife that he brought tonight. Lu Feng tried his best to pull out the dagger. After getting the knife, Lu Feng immediately cut off the tentacle that was strangling him. And very quickly he turned back and slashed the monster with a deep slash that severed its shoulder in a large chunk. At this point, Lu Feng had the upper hand, so he raised his knife to prepare to finish it. He stabbed the knife straight into the monster's head and then gently pulled a long line to slit its head in half. Using the last bit of strength to resist, the monster threw white powder into Lu Feng's face again. Right after that, his mind was dizzy and he started to want to pass out. Knowing that he would not hold out much longer, Lu Feng tried his best to open his eyes. Lu Feng decided to hug the monster tightly to prevent it from escaping and repeatedly stabbed it in its back. The next morning in a dream, Lu Feng heard the villagers call him. He tried to wake up and saw everyone in front of him. In his arms, he still clutched the straw monster, and his whole body ached. Everyone helped Lu Feng to sit up. He was still in shock from last night's events, so he looked back at the straw scarecrow lying on the ground. That's right, the knife was still stuck in it by him. The villagers helped Lu Feng back home, and at the same time they also tugged the straw scarecrow to the village. Hearing the news that the killer was caught, the whole village eagerly gathered around to see. But when they saw that the killer was a straw scarecrow, everyone was shocked, so the village chief came to reassure everyone. This straw scarecrow had absorbed the moon's light for so long that it had turned into a monster. Then the village chief reassured everyone that he would perform a ceremony to banish evil spirits. Lu Feng was the person who directly experienced everything, but he also didn't want to speak up. After that, the straw scarecrow was burned by the village chief to destroy the disaster. After a long time, no one was harmed. But after that, Lu Feng rejoined the army and did not return to the village. Later, Lu Feng became the director of Headquarters 703. One day, subordinates reported to him the arrest of a secret agent soldier. The interrogation should have been handled by a separate department. However, they had no way of talking to this spy. They reported it to Lu Feng. Looking troubled, he also went there to examine the situation. But as soon as Lu Feng got there, the spy surprised him. He was the healer from that village. The strange thing was that he hadn't changed at all from before. Only now, the healer revealed that year, he had researched and planted a seed in the human body, helping to stay young forever. But when he fought with Lu Feng, he didn't fight back. So he took the hallucinogenic powder to throw it into Lu Feng and ran away, replacing it with a straw scarecrow. After that, the healer was convicted of multiple murders and was eventually executed. The straw scarecrow incident that year was also classified as a secret case. This is a horror story that happened to a girl named Sugi and her dorm friends. Sugi used to have a happy family. However, her father often beat her mother and her because of drinking and gambling. Since then, Sugi's personality had become quieter. As time passed, Sugi went to a vocational boarding school and stayed there because of the difficult family situation. She was registered here by her mother in order for it to be convenient for both studying and traveling. The documents and procedures were quite simple, so Sugi would move in immediately. Sugi followed the instructions, brought the luggage to the school dormitory to prepare to clean and rest, and the next day she would start the first day of school. The room where Sugi lived included 4 bunk beds for 4 people. Sugi and her roommates quickly got to know each other and befriended each other. That night, as everyone in the room fell asleep, only Sugi could not sleep because of the strange place. In the middle of the night, Sugi was awakened by the aimless singing of a female roommate. The loud singing caused not only Sugi but also the other friends sleeplessness. Yoko was woken up, so she turned on the light in annoyance. It was the singing of Anna, a female friend lying in the corner of the room, opposite Sugi's bed. To avoid being punished by the supervisor, Yoko quickly turned off the lights. Then the whole room approached Anna, asking what was wrong with her. But how to ask? Anna still refused to answer, just singing idly. After a while, Anna burst out laughing like a madman. Anna's hair at the time was messy like a crow's nest. The inherent pink skin also suddenly turned pale. Pale like an anemic person, looking very scary. Then Anna suddenly stood up and went straight to the dressing table. All evening no one spoke to Anna. Whoever talked to her did not respond, just sitting in front of the mirror singing nonsense like a madman. Sugi saw Anna like that. She couldn't hide her bewilderment and approached Anna and advised her to go to sleep. But when she saw Sugi standing near her, Anna's body suddenly trembled, laughing a few times, looking terrible. Her eyes rolled back to the ceiling. At that time, people in the room saw Anna like that. Everyone panicked, thinking that Anna was sleepwalking. Sugi immediately grabbed Anna's shoulder to try to wake her up. Anna suddenly fell down on the bed in front of her friend in the room. A few seconds later, Anna's eyes widened, foaming at the mouth, and her whole body twisted and looked very scary. Sugi was looking at Anna at that time, and also showed panic. She thought it was because of herself that Anna was like this, so she frantically called the others to take Anna to the school's medical room. Sugi and her friends in the dormitory hurriedly carried Anna on their backs and ran straight to the school's medical room. On the way, suddenly Anna woke up. She blankly looked at Sugi and her surroundings, not understanding what was going on and why she was brought here. Sugi also quickly dropped her friend to the ground. After that, Anna and the others also returned to the room. Anna sat among all the friends in the dorm, telling all the strange things she had encountered before, showing strange expressions like earlier. Before going to bed, Anna sat at the table and brushed her hair, but for some reason after that, she fell asleep and she was no longer conscious of anything. But this happened over and over again with Anna. Not only her, but everyone in the room felt fear for that. Anna couldn't take it anymore, so she applied for a leave of absence from school and moved to another place. A long time later, Sugi's dorm room also had a new friend moving in. She thought everything was over, but unexpectedly something strange happened. In the middle of the night, this girl also went to the mirror, acting exactly like Anna before, looking very strange. At this time, Sugi's new friend was sitting in front of the mirror, eyes wide with ghostly appearances and black lips that looked like a corpse. Sugi and the friends in the room who witnessed the scene could only fear but did not dare to wake her again, for fear of the same situation as Anna. After a while, this girl kept rolling on the bed, sleeping soundly as nothing happened. Everyone in the room then turned on the lights. Sugi went to her friend's bed and woke the girl up. The girl didn't understand what was going on, bewilderedly looking at everyone standing around the bed looking at her, then asked Sugi why she woke her up at this hour. Sugi then told her friend about the strange incident she had met, but the girl still insisted that she had never sleepwalked. Because Sugi felt worried and suspected that the room she was in was something scary, Sugi went to ask people around if there had been many people who had a similar situation before. But the people in the area were not as friendly as she thought, especially when they heard about her dorm. Everyone started shouting loudly, sending her group away, refusing to talk. Things could not find a solution, so the members in the room became even more tired. After everyone in the room experienced this feeling once, Sugi was the next victim. That night while she was sleeping, she was suddenly woken up by a voice. Sugi clearly sensed that someone was looking at her, so she ventured to glance to the side and see a big black shadow. She jumped all over herself, rolled her eyes at the black shadow in front of her, her mouth opened as if she wanted to call her friend, but then she couldn't do anything. After a while, Sugi felt sleeplessness creeping in on her. She couldn't feel or control anything anymore. The black shadow immediately moved to the side of Sugi's bed. The cold air and the stench of the corpses rose strongly. Then, this ghost immediately stretched out its thin, bony hand, step by step touching Sugi's body. Sugi opened her eyes and the face of this ghost appeared clearly for her to see with bright and white eyes. Moments later, Sugi began to sleepwalk. She started to sit up and get out of the bed. Then Sugi went straight to the dressing table, picked up the comb in front of the mirror. The image in the mirror reflected the hand of someone other than her. Luckily, Sugi woke up, looked back at herself, feeling a little tired. She glanced in the mirror to see what was wrong. Suddenly, Sugi saw that the person in the mirror was not herself at all, but a certain woman who looked very scary. Sugi turned around in a panic to take a look and saw the woman in the mirror brushing her hair. She immediately ran to the bed, her whole body shaking with fear. The friends in her room were awakened. They also approached Sugi and wondered how Sugi was able to get out of a sleepwalking situation. It was only then that Sugi realized that the other people in the room looked at her. They knew what was wrong with her and then woke up from her sleepwalking quickly. That night, Sugi's whole room stayed up all night. Everyone in the room sat together by the window. They told everything they had seen and everything was exactly as Sugi saw it. There was a friend in the room who couldn't hide her curiosity, so she discussed how to fight that female ghost. Sugi realized that the thing that helped her wake up was the treasure that her grandmother left behind. It was a pendant made of marble with a very large Buddha image engraved on it. She looked at the pendant. Childhood memories returned to her once more. When she was young, her grandmother gave her this pendant, telling her to always carry it with her as her amulet. After that incident, Sugi was so obsessed that she couldn't sleep. and the other friends in the room also moved out. Sugi had to leave too. Staying in this room was too dangerous. After applying for leave, Sugi stood at the beginning of the street, waiting to catch the bus to go home. At that time, she inadvertently attracted the attention of the neighbors. A man who had been in the area for a long time next to her dorm approached. He told her about what happened in the dormitory she was staying in. In the past, her dorm room was the room of a female warden. Because she was upset about being raped by the superintendent, she committed suicide in that room. Since then, anyone who had stayed in that room had experienced sleepwalking in the middle of the night. No one dared to say that they had met a ghost. Then they moved away because they couldn't stay there anymore. A few years ago, I opened a small photography shop on a street corner. Although the business was not very crowded, it also brought me a stable source of income. Every morning, I brought new photos, taking to hang outside the store to advertise and attract customers. However, the following days I sat at the counter, yawned, and waited for customers. But still, no one came. One weekend, the doorbell at my shop rang. That was the first customer who came to my shop to take pictures after a sluggish week. I looked at her. It was a young woman with a slim figure, and her face was also very pretty. I asked how the photo shoot was that she needed. This young woman was in no hurry to answer. Her slightly sad face looked at me, mixed with a little awkwardness that made me curious. I invited her to follow me deep into the set to briefly refer to the scenes and choose the right photography style. What surprised me the most was the decisive and cold answer of the female customer. She said she wanted me to take her photo like a worship photo. I looked at her in surprise, not sure if I heard wrong or not. Because if she was young, taking pictures of worship so early was an omen of bad luck and taboo that no one dared to do. I hesitated at first, hoping she would change her mind, but this girl was very determined. She really wanted me to take a worship photo. To please the customer, I reluctantly took her inside. As I walked, a strange idea flashed in my mind based on the suggestion of this female customer. I could open a deaf experience photography service. It sounded a bit weird, but it was also suitable for young people. But that eccentric thought was quickly forgotten when this female client and I went to the portrait picture room for the elderly. There was only one small chair in the middle of the room, and around many large light catch lamps. I invited this female customer inside and sat on the chair to prepare to take pictures. I purposefully avoided taboo by telling her to sit in front of the white font, like taking a card photo, but she refused and said she wanted to be photographed in the original form according to a standard worship photo. Knowing that I could not persuade the strange female customer, I immediately followed her advice. I brought the small chair to the blue background at the back of the room and prepared my camera to start shooting. I tried to focus, and my eyes fixed on the small lens. This girl's face showed tension, nervousness, and sadness inexplicably. To relieve her tension, I gently told this girl to smile, but it didn't work. Her expression remained as gloomy as when she first entered my photography shop. I helped her take a few more pictures so she could choose the best one. I guess she was overly stressed about the photo shoot, so I tried to reassure her. After more than half an hour of simple photography, the shoot was finally over. I quickly informed this female customer and asked her to come back here the next day to receive pictures. Her photo would be finished by about the following noon. She softly uttered 2 words, "Thank you," and then gave me a gentle smile. It was the only smile on her beautiful face since the morning. I carefully sent her out. I walked close to her so I could feel the cold emanating from her pale, slender body. She didn't say goodbye to me but just looked straight ahead and gently walked out. Her enigmatic silence puzzled me greatly. That night I remembered the returning photos appointment for the only female customer this morning, so I worked on the pictures until the middle of the night. But strangely enough, the pictures taken of the girl in the morning were all wrong. I tried to hold the photo in my hand, shined it under the lamp and looked closely, but could not find any clues to what damaged them. All photos taken of this girl were blurred, not clear, and out of focus. Although, when I took the photo, I focused very carefully. I guess the problem was most likely in the reels that I shot, but no matter how much I searched, I found this reel to be perfectly normal and without any problems. That made me feel even more strange when I looked at the photo of the female customer in the morning. To fix it, I had to take a photo again, but that was completely impossible. I scratched my head awkwardly, trying to figure out how to explain when I had to give her pictures tomorrow. The next day she showed up on time. She was still wearing yesterday's red dress, but her face looked haggard and sharper. When the girl just came in front of me, I saw some dark bruises on her already beautiful face, which made me even more curious about the real life of this mysterious girl. She quickly asked me about the photo. Before the impatience to receive her photo, I felt extremely awkward and guilty. I didn't know how to explain it to her. The two of us fell into deep thought, unable to say another word. The girl always stared at me with expectant eyes, and I stayed silent. I slowly walked to the place that kept her pictures. My eyes couldn't leave her for even a second. Then I took the photo and put it on the table, mouth faltering. I tried to explain to her that there was a problem in the process of editing her picture, so I asked her if she could take another picture or not. She did not rush to answer my request, just calmly staring at the photo with sad eyes. The most amazing thing was that she didn't blame me for my skills, nor did she ask me to take a picture again. She said I framed it for her picture. I was happy to do that, immediately negotiating the frame size. After making sure this girl asked me to take the picture from back to her house, and she would give me the money. Her offer to me was not too difficult, so I readily accepted. After doing as she said, I followed her home. She gently walked ahead, and I calmly bought the picture frame behind. She took me through quite a distance, even crossing the highway, which made me a little surprised and confused. After a while, the two of us exited the main road and went to the edge of the forest. At that time, I felt a bit weird. I suspected this girl had bad intentions, so I raised my voice. Faced with my suspicions, she looked very calm. She reassured me, saying that her house was only a few 100 meters away. I agreed to follow her for a shorter distance. Arriving at an empty lot, she pointed to a large mound of dirt on the side of the road and told me to put a picture frame on it. I was surprised, thinking that she was joking with me, so I kept asking her again to verify if there were any houses in this deserted place. But the answer I got from her was always denial. This strange girl insisted that her house was on that mound and told me to put the picture on there for her. I seemed to have run out of patience. A whole day of walking was exhausting and it took no time to look after the shop, so I got angry and rushed to grab her shoulders. Only then did I feel the strangeness of this female client's body. As soon as I touched her, her flesh immediately seemed to cling to my hand and disintegrate. I was startled. I pulled my hand back to take a look and saw that the flesh on her shoulder was clinging to my hands. I shivered, slowly raising my eyes to look at the strange girl in front of me. That's right. The place where my hand was placed appeared a large hole as if it was gangrene. I gently stepped back, unable to fully articulate the identity verification question I wanted to ask her. When she saw my panic, she burst into tears and complained that her whole body was itchy and uncomfortable. But no matter where she scratched, I could hear the flesh falling right there. Her whole body was now white, her eyes were lifeless and crazy, her whole body gave off a foul smell like a corpse. After that, everywhere her fingers went, a row of tender, sagging meat looked horrible. I realized this customer was a ghost, so I screamed and ran away. I followed the trail and found my way out of the jungle. I ran to the police station to report this customer's story, and from there I also found a lot of information. As it turned out, she was a female student at a famous university in the city. It was also located near my photography shop. We went to her dorm and learned that her friends hadn't seen her for a few months. The police immediately contacted the family and immediately determined this to be a disappearance. From the clues and evidence collected from the police, the culprit was also captured. He was a guy who dated the schoolgirl. The two met each other through social media and moved in together for a while. Because he saw her asking for a breakup, he turned his love into hatred, killed her, and buried her body in this mound of wasteland. Since that time, my shop had also become more gloomy and empty. Seeing that the business was not very good, I had to close the shop and find myself another job to do. This morning at the branch office was very busy. There were many large and small cases, but they were mostly resolved. Suddenly someone ran in a hurry as screams echoed throughout the hallway. His expression was so frightened and panicked. He rushed to a policeman and started telling everything, but he was so scared he couldn't say anything clearly. He kept repeating that they were zombies, they were corpses, they could kill people. The policeman led the man to meet the boss Lu Feng. The policeman rushed inside to report everything to boss Lu Feng. However, the witness was so frightened that he couldn't tell all of it. But based on what his ramblings were, the suburb seemed to be having some kind of mysterious problem. Without hesitation, boss Lu Feng immediately ordered the first platoon to get ready with vehicles and weapons to reach the reported destination quickly. Following the instructions of the witness, the team soon arrived at a large cemetery outside the suburbs. The team needed to walk inside, led by boss Lu Feng, the man who was still panicked but calm enough to lead everyone to the location of the incident. The cemetery was huge, so the team had to walk for a while to reach the place where the stories reported about a zombie happened, but in front of them instead was a dead human body. Boss Lu Feng quickly ordered the forensic team and the investigation team to examine the body. As soon as the forensic team approached the body, both the team and the boss Lu Feng were amazed. In the end, what could happen to a victim that could cause such a horrible death? The first step of judgment, the victim was a middle-aged man who was probably the one visiting the grave, and the cause of death seemed like he was scared to death without closing his eyes, with a face frozen with fear. After checking the surroundings for a while, the team also found a fairly new discovery, so they rushed to report to boss Lu Feng. There was a very suspicious fallen tomb. The policeman reported to boss Lu. Boss Lu Feng ordered a thorough examination of the entire cemetery and around the other graves, where they should not leave any small details uninvestigated because this case consisted of many strange and suspicious things. Arriving at the headquarters, waiting for the witness to be calmer, the policeman asked again for more details about what he had seen. The witness was very stressed and confirmed that this case was not caused by humans but rather certainly related to what he saw. The policemen were also amazed and still thought that he was still very frightened because they were sure to find something if this was the case. The policeman then reassured him and asked him to explain everything in detail one more time. Last night, he went to the cemetery as always to worship his ancestors and burn gold and silver banknotes for his wife. It was around 11 p.m. While burning incense and saddened by his wife's death, he suddenly heard a murmur like someone was talking. He was curious because there was no one when he entered here a while ago, but he heard so many voices at that time. He turned back to take a closer look, and the thing in front of him shocked him. The screams were heard throughout the graveyard, but it was too late that no one could listen to his calls for help. In front of him was a zombie. Just like in the zombie movies, its teeth and fingernails were so long and gruesome, it slowly started coming towards him. He was so frightened that he urinated in his pants while trying his best to run away, but as he turned, he bumped someone's leg. Before he could muster himself up, he looked up hoping that someone would come to save him, but what he had bumped into further frightened him. In front of him now was another zombie with the looks of a woman. He used up his courage to pick up a log from the ground to defend himself, but he was surrounded by zombies. They multiplied and surrounded him. In a panic, he repeatedly swung the log to protect himself and found his way out. The claws of the zombies were highly sharp, injuring his face. But after a while of struggling, he escaped and immediately went to the police station to report the incident. He firmly asserted that he was not lying with panic on his face, even though it seemed unbelievable. The police officer who took the testimony quickly showed it to boss Lu Feng and said that the witness did not seem to be making the story up. Boss Lu Feng pondered for a bit and then ordered to find the cemetery guard to investigate more clues. Then they rushed to their destination, where the cemetery guard always lived in a small house next to the cemetery. The guard was a middle-aged man with a sad face. After briefly listening to the police about the case, the man said that lately he has often heard many strange noises coming from the cemetery. The policeman carefully took note of the old man's testimony. As he spoke, the older man looked towards the cemetery. He said that he had seen strange things, many zombies wandering around the cemetery, but he just thought that he was all dizzy and hearing imaginary things. Then he took the policeman to look around the cemetery again. Then suddenly there was something very strange that caught the attention of the policeman. A tomb had been broken yesterday morning, but today it was set up neatly. But according to the cemetery guard, this tomb has not been cared for in a long time. After taking the information in for a while and looking around, the detective returned to report to boss Lu Feng about the situation. After hearing about everything, Lu Feng was very angry, thinking that someone was pretending to be evil to harm others. So he made orders that night to silently enter the cemetery to investigate. That night at the cemetery, the atmosphere was terrifyingly quiet. Captain Chow and his teammates soon led an ambush throughout the cemetery, and eventually a suspicious person appeared. Captain Chow silently watched the suspicious man because he did not look like visiting the grave. Just a moment later, he turned in another direction. Captain Chow hurriedly chased after him. He could not see anything except for a grave in front of his eyes. Right now, he suddenly heard horrible voices and howls. He glanced back to see what was going on. Behind him was a large group of zombies. They were pale and had long claws slashing out while slowly approaching him. On reflex, Captain Chow took out his gun and shot at an oncoming zombie. By this time, his teammates came to assist him right on time, and everyone also found out that shooting at them didn't really work. Captain Chow was unconvinced if they were real zombies because there's no such nonsense that exists in the world. After a long struggle, they still showed no sign of stopping but only continued to attack, getting closer and closer. Immediately, Captain Chow ordered to capture all of them. He did not believe that in this world there were things such as zombies. After capturing and cuffing them, Captain Chow discovered something behind the other tomb. There seemed to be some kind of strange movement coming from there. He had immediately rushed to get behind the tombstone, only to discover the man he watched earlier intending to escape. As soon as he popped his head, Captain Chow pointed his gun at his head. It turned out that below this grave was a cellar, and so the suspicious man had been captured. After arresting the man, Captain Chow went down to the cellar to inspect. Underneath the basement, he found cages and signal transceivers. At the police station, interrogating the strange man, he said he was the old guard of the cemetery because without education, he had no home. So the cemetery guard had a house to stay in, and the salary was relatively high. He was delighted with it. But because he was lazy, he was kicked out. At some point, he discovered that these homeless people had strange diseases and moved like zombies, and most had even lost their awareness. He confined in them under the fake tomb that he created and then told them to scare anyone who would get near the cemetery. But unexpectedly, all of this caused death. The homeless people were taken into the headquarters' private emergency room by the boss Lu Feng. Boss Lu asked the doctor about the conditions of these homeless people. Through initial diagnosis, the doctor said that they had strange diseases, causing their brains to be eroded. This disease is contagious and makes people move like zombies. Then Boss Lu told the doctor that these people should stay here for research. They could not be released, otherwise they would be a problematic pandemic. That afternoon at the police station, the subordinates also brought the man who had the plan to Boss Lu Feng. He pondered for a long time and decided to deal with the other man for his crimes. Finally, the case was closed. Boss Lu told his subordinates to notify the press that there were no zombies or corpses. The case was also marked as a top secret case and listed in the issues that need to be monitored by the police department.